Hi, I am Stephen Vizinczey, and I want to talk today about Pushkin. Pushkin is a bad news for racists because he was a Negro and the greatest Russian writer. He's the Shakespeare of Russian literature. There wasn't a dozen writers as great in the world in Western literature than Pushkin. What is great about Pushkin is not so much the story, but the fact that he could tell you, he could involve you. He makes you co-author of the book because he inspires you to think yourself of details which he doesn't put in. So he uses words which allows you to add the meaning between the lines. I would like to mention an example, one of his stories, the Shot. The Shot is the story of an officer retired officer who spends all his time shooting flies. He lives in a little mud house, and he has an orderly, and whenever he sees a fly on the wall, he calls for his gun and shoots the fly dead. He had a fantastic aim. And he spends his whole life really practicing perfect shooting with his gun. And the story is told by one of his young admirers. He's a middle-aged man. And he also has card parties in his house for the other officers, because in a village the officers have nothing to do except to drink and play cards and do exercises, military exercises, which doesn't take too much of their time. So one of the new officers who came to the to this card game insults the hero of this older officer who gives the party. And since the older officer is such a great shot, after the insult, all the officers think that the newcomer will be dead by the next day, because he calls him out to duel. And they are very surprised to see that new man still being around next day. He didn't. He wasn't challenged by the hero of the story. So his young admirer who tells the story is very disappointed, and he is no longer looking at this older man with admiration and enthusiasm. So then one day the officer receives a letter, the older officer receives a letter, and he packs his bag and he has to go. And they have a last drinking party, farewell party, and when they all gone, he calls back the young man who is the narrator to tell him what happened. He said that a rich aristocratic young man slapped him at the party, and so he called him out to duel. And when they came over, that young officer the aristocrat was so nonchalant that he was eating cherry why they were supposed to have the duel. So the first shot belongs to the aristocrat, the young aristocrat, and he shoots through the cap of the older officer. And then when it's his turn, he eats cherries nonchalantly from his own cap, expecting the older officer to shoot, and he doesn't. He said that, you know, I will reserve that shot because right now it means nothing to you. You are not interested. The young aristocrat is a bachelor, doesn't give a damn. And the young aristocrat said, all right, you can give I owe you a shot. And they part. And years later, when the narrator retires to his own village, he receives a call, which is a big event, that there is the next estate is a big estate belonging to a prince. And when he hears that the prince is coming, he goes to present himself to them as a neighbor. And when he goes to their house, he's really quite embarrassed with these grand people, because he's a small gentry. He has 5 or 6 sheriffs of one village, and so he's very embarrassed in front of these grand people from the height of aristocratic society in St. Petersburg. And the princess want to give him time to get used to his presence. And while they talk to each other, the princess, he looks at the wall and he sees a picture, a painting showing a Swiss landscape. But what attracts him to the landscape, that there is a bullet in the painting, and there is another bullet on top of it. And at the end, he finds out that the prince is that formerly young aristocrat who was eating cherries during the duel. And they say that, oh, you know that man, and they say that that guy came to them, and the prince came home alone because his wife horse stumbled and he rode ahead. And when he got home, newly married, he saw the older officer who could shoot flies waiting for him, and said, I'm waiting for you owe me a shot. And the prince is very pale and nervous because he's just got married. And he said, all right, have your shot. And then the older officer says, this would be like murder, let's do it again. They draw the lot again, and the aristocrat again, the prince, wins. He will have the first shot. And he is so nervous that he shoots the painting. And then it is the older man's chance. And but then his wife arrives and says, what is happening? What is happening? And And her husband tells her, leave us alone, we are just playing and amusing ourselves. He doesn't want to upset his wife. And is it really true? And the older man says, well, he's always joking. He joked 25 years ago when he, or 10 years ago, when he ate cherries during our first duel. He joked when he slapped me at a party, and he's joking now. He's a joker. And the prince is very, sir, have your shot and let's get over with it. And the older officer says, I'm satisfied. You are afraid. You are pale. I don't need to show you. I had my revenge. And leaves. And as he leaves, he, with hardly turning around, he shots, he places a shot in the painting. And that bullet again goes to the top of the other bullet. But that's a long story to say the main point. There are several points like that all through the story. That he doesn't say, Pushkin doesn't say that that bullet reached there. It is you, the reader, who have to connect the two things. Because the pleasure of thinking and why it is lovely to read great books, and it's a thrilling thing to read great books, that you are involved. You have to do some of the writing yourself. Reading is a creative act. And so when he goes away, it is you, the reader, who have to remember that that bullet in the painting was the bullet which the old officer shot without hardly turning. And because this is the pleasure of thinking, that you connect things which are not connected. Reading a great book is the kind of pleasure you have when you do crosswords. You make connection, because that's what thinking is about. You make connections. And nowhere can you make so many connections than in something great. And that makes Pushkin one of the greatest writers in the world, that he forces you, inspires you to make more connection than anybody else. Except Kleist. Very interestingly, the German was also an aristocrat. Writing, since most writers were paid, all writers were paid by the number of words they've used, they were all guilty of padding. Dickens, Balzac, they all padded, because more words, more money, they got paid extra for every word. Except Kleist and Pushkin. And very strangely, they were both aristocrats. And so they really just wrote as few words. They told what had to be told with as few words as possible. Another thing which might give you an idea of how a great writer relates to what he writes and how he lives. He doesn't live to serve the market. They write something which is very important to them. And I think Pushkin, who also died stupidly in a duel, as Nekrasov, there are several great Russian writers died in duel. And one of the reasons, and I think the main reason they got involved in ridiculous duels, was that they wrote about it so much, and they were curious of how does it really feel like when you fight a duel. And so to check that what they wrote was correct, they risked their lives. I think this is the kind of attitude you should have to writing, And this is the great writers had real commitment. They didn't write to please the market, didn't write books which the reader want to read. They write books which they wanted to write. There is a great difference there. And I wrote, you will read his stories. It's out in Penguin and Vintage, his stories. And I hope you will read it. I must say, I find no very unsatisfactory the way of my description of the story, because it is far more exciting than I could possibly suggest to you. There is this kind of connection the reader has to make about 5 times on a page, a single page, connecting two things which are then, but they are not good, which Pushkin himself doesn't connect. You will have to do the connections, and that's why reading them is fantastic. I really do hope you will read Pushkin, and it will put you up for many mediocre novels. Another thing, though, why I am urging you to read Pushkin is to urge you not to read any book, whoever praises it, because somebody told you it's great or you think you have to read it. If a book doesn't appeal to you, and it's possible that at the stage of your life you are, Pushkin is not for you, that if you don't like a book, it doesn't speak to you, doesn't excite you, then don't read it to the end. Because to read a book which doesn't give you anything, which bores you, is like bad sex. It just puts you off reading. That's what I have against most of the teaching of literature, is that they make you read things, and many of the listed books which you have to read bores you, and if it happens to students, it puts many of them off reading for life. Well, see you again next time.